My name is Michael Hayes, and I was born and raised in a small town just outside Charleston, West Virginia. I've always been someone who felt comfortable in the outdoors. Growing up, I spent countless weekends exploring the rolling hills and dense forests that surrounded our community, pitching tents with my friends, and fishing along the many creeks and rivers. Nature never intimidated me. It gave me a sense of calm and reminded me of my own insignificance in the grand scheme of things. But all that changed because of what happened during a trip I took nearly 10 years ago. It was the summer of 2014, and though quite some time has passed since then, I can still remember every detail with unsettling clarity. I had saved up for a used RV, nothing fancy, just a small, well-loved Class B motorhome with a fold-out couch and a tiny kitchenette, so that I could travel across the country on my own terms. The plan was simple. I'd take a few weeks off work and head west, stopping at various campsites, state parks, and remote stretches of national forest land along the way. I wanted to go slow, to savor the solitude, to take photographs, and maybe write down a few thoughts in my journal. I had no strict itinerary. The freedom of the open road was what appealed to me most. On the afternoon in question, I had been driving along a scenic route that cut through the Appalachian foothills. It was late July, and the days were hot but not unbearable. The sky was that brilliant blue that makes you feel lucky just to be alive, and I was in no particular rush. I remember pulling into a small gas station off a rural highway. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been there for 50 years, a single pump outside, and a dimly lit interior cluttered with old signs and dusty merchandise. I asked the older man working the register if he knew of any good spots nearby to camp where I wouldn't be disturbed by crowds. He gave me a crooked smile, scratched his stubbly chin, and told me about a Forest Service road a few miles up ahead. "It's quiet out there," he said. "You'll be all by yourself." He pointed to a faded map taped to the wall and tapped a spot with his nicotine-stained fingertip. "Most folks don't head that way anymore. Good place if you want your privacy." He didn't say anything else that struck me as odd at the time, nor did he discourage me. He just took my payment, handed me my change, and reminded me to be careful. That's not unusual advice when heading into remote areas, so I didn't think twice about it. I got back into the RV and followed his directions, turning onto a narrow gravel road that branched off from the main highway. After about 20 minutes of slow driving, watching out for potholes and leaning tree limbs, I found a small clearing where I could pull off and level the RV. It was a peaceful spot, shaded by tall pines, with a gentle slope leading down to a trickling stream. It felt perfect. I turned off the engine and listened to the quiet, stepped outside and took a long breath of that fragrant summer air. I set up a small campfire ring with stones I found scattered nearby, gathered some fallen branches for kindling, and prepared for what I anticipated would be a relaxing night under the stars. As dusk settled in, the forest came alive with the chorus of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl. I sat by my campfire, sipping a lukewarm beer, writing a few notes in my journal. It was just me and the gentle crackle of the flames. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found such a spot, one not listed in any travel guide or campground directory. It felt like my own secret slice of paradise. I went to sleep relatively early, probably around 10 p.m. The couch in the back of the RV folded down into a bed, and I had the windows cracked just enough to let in some fresh air. I recall drifting off easily, feeling safe and at peace. But at some point in the middle of the night, I woke to a very slight sound. My eyes snapped open in the darkness. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it, a muffled thump or a cautious footstep. I listened carefully. Initially, there was nothing but the nighttime hush. Slowly, though, as my ears adjusted, I heard the faint crunch of leaves outside. It could have been a deer or maybe a fox. Wildlife is plentiful out there. I told myself to relax. But then I heard another sound, something that didn't belong. It was the soft metallic clink of something tapping against the RV's exterior. Not aggressive, but deliberate. Instinctively, I sat up quietly. I had no weapons with me other than a small hatchet I used for chopping wood. My heart began to pound. Maybe an animal had wandered close and was sniffing around. Perhaps a raccoon was pawing at the side. Yet the sound pattern didn't feel right. It was too purposeful, too careful. I slid off the bed and tiptoed to the front of the RV, carefully moving the curtain aside just a fraction. The moon was out, casting pale light through the pines. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a slight movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. Two silhouettes stood there among the trees. They weren't moving much, but they were definitely human. My gut twisted. Who would be out here, at this hour, standing silently among the trees, watching my RV? I must have made some noise, or maybe they just felt my gaze, because one of them turned his head in my direction. I let the curtain fall back immediately and retreated to the center of the RV, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to think logically. It could be other campers who stumbled onto my site, maybe hunters who got lost, or maybe they were just curious locals. Still, something about their posture, their silence, and the timing made my skin crawl. There was no friendly hello or light of a flashlight, just silent watchers in the dark. I stood there, not knowing what to do. My phone had no reception out here, which I'd known going in. There was no way to call for help. I thought about shouting at them, asking what they wanted, but fear kept my voice locked inside my throat. Instead, I stood still and listened. After a few minutes, the quiet outside persisted. Maybe they'd gone. Summoning some courage, I peeked out again. One of them was closer now, a man in a dark jacket, standing not more than 10 feet from the RV's passenger side door. His back was to me, but he stood at an angle that allowed me to see his profile. He wore no hat, and his hair was short, almost buzzed. He was tall and lean. He wasn't looking at me through the window. Instead, he seemed to be examining the RV's exterior. I could see his shoulder move slightly as he ran his hand along the side. The other figure was just barely visible behind him, lingering in the shadows. I couldn't make out any details, just that the second person was there, waiting. Every nerve in my body screamed danger. There was no mistaking the intent now. They were trying to get inside. I watched as the man reached for the door handle. Luckily, I had locked it before going to bed. He tried turning it once, twice, then tried pulling with more force. The RV shook slightly. My mind raced. If I confronted them, would they break in out of panic or hostility? If I stayed quiet, would they give up and leave? These thoughts whirled in my head as I stood there, paralyzed by indecision. Suddenly, the handle rattled violently. He knew I was in there. Maybe he'd seen my shadow. Maybe he'd heard me moving. I heard a muffled voice, a low whisper, something I couldn't make out. The other figure stepped forward, and I saw the glint of something metallic, maybe a crowbar or a tire iron. My heart sank. This was no innocent encounter. These people intended to harm me, rob me, or worse. I remembered the hatchet near the kitchenette. With trembling hands, I grabbed it and crouched low. I prayed they would just move on, but the tension outside only seemed to grow. The door handle was jiggling again, more forcefully. Then I heard a dull thump on the driver's side window. They were testing the glass. The RV was old, and I knew the windows weren't exactly bulletproof. They could easily smash one and crawl inside. That realization triggered my survival instincts. I switched off all interior lights and slowly crept toward the driver's seat. If I could start the engine and drive out of there, I might escape. But the keys were in my bag on the passenger seat. To get them, I'd have to stand up and be visible through the windshield. Yet if I stayed put, I was a sitting duck. Thump. Another hit, this time louder. Panic surged through me. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I lunged forward, grabbed the keys from my bag, and jammed them into the ignition. In that split second, one of them must have seen the movement. I heard a frantic shuffling outside, and then a heavy blow against the side window. The glass spider-webbed but didn't fully break. I turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice. My heart nearly stopped, then roared to life. Without hesitating, I slammed the RV into drive and hit the gas. The RV lurched forward, bouncing over a small log I had placed near the tire as a makeshift brake. I nearly lost control as I maneuvered around the trees in the dark, the headlights illuminating a narrow path through the forest. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of the two figures scrambling aside to avoid being run over. One of them yelled something, but I couldn't make out the words. I sped down that gravel road faster than was safe, branches scraping the sides, the entire vehicle rattling. I kept expecting gunshots to ring out or a tire to blow, but nothing happened. After what felt like an eternity, probably just a couple of minutes, I made it back to the main road. There, I turned west and drove without stopping for miles. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. Eventually, I found a more populated area, a small town with a diner that was still lit up. I pulled into the lot, parked under a fluorescent light, and just sat there breathing heavily, trying to calm my nerves. Eventually, I went inside, where the waitress eyed me with concern. I must have looked pale and wild-eyed. I told her I'd had a scare out in the woods, that some people had tried to break into my RV. She offered me coffee, and I accepted. I sat there, hands wrapped around the warm mug, still feeling exposed and vulnerable. The presence of other people felt like a shield. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? I didn't know exactly where I'd been, somewhere off a forest road recommended by a random gas station attendant. I didn't have a clear description of the attackers' faces, just two men in the dark, lurking silently until they decided to strike. I never went back to that spot, never reported it. Maybe I should have, but at the time I just wanted to forget. I didn't continue my planned route either. The next morning, after a sleepless night in the diner's parking lot, I turned the RV around and headed back east toward home. The trip I'd dreamed about for months was cut short by a single night of terror. What haunts me most is the uncertainty of their intentions. Were they just petty thieves looking to rob a random traveler? Or had they planned something far worse? The way they stood there, silently observing me, still sends a chill down my spine. It was as if they were sizing me up, waiting for the right moment. I've replayed those moments in my mind countless times, thinking of what I could have done differently. Maybe if I hadn't asked that gas station attendant for a quiet place to camp. Maybe if I'd stuck to established campgrounds. Maybe if I'd brought some form of protection. There are so many maybes. I also think about what might have happened if the RV's engine had failed to start. It was old, after all, and sometimes took a couple of tries. If it hadn't started right up, I would have been trapped. They could have smashed the window and taken me by surprise. The fear of that scenario still keeps me awake on certain nights, even now, years later. Some close friends have told me I'm lucky to be alive, that I should see it as a reminder to be more careful. They're right, of course, but that doesn't erase the memory. For a long time after that, I didn't go camping, not even with friends. The very thought of sleeping in a tent or an RV far from help made me queasy. I missed the comfort I once found in nature, the gentle lullaby of crickets and the soft glow of moonlight filtering through leaves. I had to relearn how to trust the woods. Over time, I did go back out, but always in well-known campsites, always with a friend or two, always with a fully charged phone and a way to contact help if needed. The naive joy I once felt setting up a campfire in the middle of nowhere had been replaced by a cautious awareness. I don't consider myself a fearful person by nature, but that night taught me that danger can appear anywhere, even in places we consider peaceful and remote. I realized that for all its beauty, the wilderness can also be a stage for human predators, people who use the cover of darkness and isolation to do terrible things. Sometimes I wonder if those two men had followed me from the gas station, if the attendant had inadvertently sent me into a trap, or if it was just a terrible coincidence. The idea of being watched and followed, of having my vulnerability assessed, unsettles me deeply. I've never gone back to that gas station to ask questions. It's possible that old man gave me innocent directions, having no idea who lurked out there in the forests. Or maybe he knew something, sensed something off, and didn't warn me strongly enough. I'll never know the truth. In the years since, I've told this story a handful of times to people who ask why I don't travel alone anymore. Some believe me outright, some raise an eyebrow, as if I'm exaggerating. But the memory is too vivid, the fear too real for me to doubt myself. I remember the chill of that midnight air, the sight of that man's silhouette against the pines, the jangle of the door handle, the tension in my body as I waited for something awful to happen. It's strange how such a brief encounter, maybe 20 or 30 minutes at most, can leave such a lasting mark. Before that night, I'd camped alone many times and never had a problem. I knew to store food properly, to respect wildlife, and to avoid trespassing on private land. I considered myself an experienced, cautious traveler, but I had no real defense against human malice except luck and the presence of mind to flee when I had the chance. That night, I learned that sometimes the biggest threat isn't the bears or snakes or sudden storms, it's other people. People who don't respect your life or your property, who thrive on catching you off guard, who wait until the darkest hour to make their move. For anyone who considers taking a similar trip, I won't say don't do it, because I know the lure of the open road. I know how restorative the wilderness can be. But I will say, be prepared, be aware, and trust your instincts. If a place feels off, leave. If something inside you says not to stay there, don't. In my case, I ignored no obvious warnings. Nothing felt wrong until it was too late. But maybe I should have asked more questions at that gas station, noticed any suspicious vehicles that might have followed me, or chosen a more public campsite. I don't blame myself entirely, but I acknowledge that I was unprepared for the reality of human predators. I've come to accept what happened as part of my life story, a scar on my memory that shaped my view of personal safety. It hasn't completely ruined nature for me, but it reminded me that no place is immune to darkness. When I do venture out now, I keep my eyes open, I share my itinerary with friends, and I carry more than just a hatchet for splitting firewood. The world hasn't gotten safer, and I'm not taking chances. To this day, if I close my eyes in a quiet room, I can still see the moonlight in that clearing and those two figures in the shadows. I can feel that rising panic and the desperate hope that my engine would start. It's a memory that will stay with me, and perhaps that's for the best. Maybe it keeps me alive and cautious, ensures that I'll never again ignore the presence of unseen watchers in the night. I want to end with a small piece of advice for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. If you feel trapped, remember that your best weapon might be surprise. They expected me to be too scared to move, or perhaps to engage them directly. Starting the RV and driving off was the last thing they might have anticipated. Most people in an RV are there because they've made camp for the night, not because they're ready to escape at a moment's notice. That unexpected move probably saved my life. I'm still Michael Hayes from West Virginia. I still love the hills and forests of my homeland, but I'm not the same man who left home with stars in his eyes and a carefree heart all those years ago. I've seen the darker side of what can happen when you're alone in the woods, and I respect that darkness now. It's taught me that caution is not cowardice, and that trusting your instincts is not paranoia, but wisdom earned through experience. My name is Daniel Crowley, and I'm originally from a small town in West Virginia called Fayetteville. Growing up near the New River Gorge, I always found comfort in nature. The woods felt safe, like an old friend. Whether it was fishing along the riverbank or hiking through dense forests, I felt at home outside. After high school, I even worked a few summers as a guide, leading tourists through trails and introducing them to the wild beauty of my home state. But in July of 2016, something happened that shook that feeling of security right out of me. I'd been planning a solo RV trip for months, a journey across a few Appalachian states, sleeping in scattered national forests, and enjoying a little solitude after a tough year. I wanted time to think, to reset. I'd recently lost a close friend in a car accident and needed the quiet of the woods to help me come to terms with my grief. Little did I know, I was about to stumble into a situation that would remind me how dangerous solitude can be when you cross paths with the wrong people. The first few days of my journey were uneventful in the best possible way. I took old state routes rather than highways, passing through quaint towns and farmland. I stopped at small diners, chatted with locals, and slept in my RV at established campgrounds. By the time I reached a remote area near the border of West Virginia and Virginia, I was feeling more like myself again. The forest called out to me with its familiar hush of pine needles underfoot, and the distant gurgle of streams hidden behind thick ferns. I'd spoken to a ranger at a visitor center the previous afternoon. He mentioned a lesser-known Forest Service road that wound through a deep section of woodland, a place with no established campground, but where dispersed camping was allowed. "It's off the beaten path," he said, leaning over a counter covered in maps. "You won't find many folks out there, but it's safe enough if you know what you're doing. Just watch out for sudden weather shifts, and make sure to let someone know where you're headed." I thanked him, but didn't tell anyone else my plans. I was feeling stubbornly independent, and in retrospect, too confident. The next morning, I filled up the RV's tank in a sleepy town, grabbed some groceries, and headed for that remote forest road. After about an hour of driving, pavement giving way to gravel, then to a bumpy dirt track, I found a small clearing by a creek. It was perfect. The RV fit snugly between a pair of birch trees, and I could just make out a ridgeline through the pines. The isolation felt peaceful, exactly what I'd been seeking. I spent the afternoon reading on a folding chair, listening to the gentle whisper of the wind. Occasionally, I'd hear a bird cry out, or the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. When evening came, I built a small campfire, boiled some water for coffee, and jotted down notes in my journal. I wrote about my friend who'd passed, how the silence of these woods helped me remember him without pain. Darkness settled in slowly, and the stars emerged bright between tree limbs. The loneliness was comfortable, like a warm blanket wrapped around my tired mind. I turned in early, sometime around 10. My RV was small but cozy, with a fold-out bed that smelled faintly of old fabric and cedar chips. I left a window cracked for fresh air and let the lullaby of the forest carry me toward sleep. Sometime after midnight, I woke with a start. My heart was pounding, though I couldn't immediately recall why. I listened. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. The steady chorus of crickets had faded. The rustling leaves had gone still. It took me a moment to realize what felt off. Silence had replaced the comforting hum of nighttime life. My body tensed as I strained my ears for any sign of movement. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound against metal. It was coming from outside near the rear of the RV. My mind raced through possibilities. A branch? An animal brushing up against the side? I held my breath and waited. The scraping came again, this time followed by a soft, deliberate knock. Not the random scuff of an animal's paw. It felt intentional. I reached for my flashlight and clicked it on, careful to keep it pointed down so no beam would escape through the windows. I crouched by the small kitchenette, hardly daring to breathe. The knock sounded again, then a voice, a whisper so low I almost didn't catch it. "Hey, you in there?" My blood ran cold. Who would be out here at this hour, whispering at my RV door? This was not a well-known campsite. It was an isolated spot. My heart hammered. I glanced around for a weapon. I had a camp knife in a drawer and a hatchet by the driver's seat. Quietly, I slid the drawer open and wrapped my hand around the knife's handle. I waited, paralyzed by indecision. Should I respond? Shout for the person to go away? Maybe they were lost, injured, in need of help. But something in their voice, low, breathy, too calm, set off alarm bells. If they needed help, wouldn't they call out more desperately? I moved to the window above the sink and gently nudged the curtain a fraction of an inch. At first I saw nothing. The moonlight was filtered by the canopy, giving only pale outlines of trees and my camp chair by the dying embers of the fire. Then to the left, I spotted a shape. A figure stood there, just outside the range of the leftover firelight. It was a man, tall and slender, hunched slightly forward, as if trying to peer under my RV's awning. Another voice off to the right whispered something I couldn't make out. There was more than one person. My stomach tightened. I felt the press of fear at the base of my throat. "Maybe he's asleep," said the first voice, louder now. The tone was oddly casual, like someone checking to see if a neighbor was home. "Let's see if we can open it." Open it? Were they trying to break in? I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. I felt along the cabinets until I found my hatchet and quietly unhooked it from the wall. My mind raced. The RV was locked, but that wouldn't stop determined intruders. I had to think. Should I start the engine and try to drive off? But doing so would mean climbing into the driver's seat, turning on lights, making noise, exposing myself. If they were right outside, they'd hear me, maybe smash a window before I got going. I heard a gentle tug at the door handle. The RV rocked slightly, as someone tested their weight against it. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable smash of glass. Instead, I heard muffled laughter, the kind of laughter that comes from people who enjoy someone else's discomfort. My mind jumped back to a warning I'd once heard from an old friend. In remote areas, you sometimes run into people who aren't just trespassers or curious wanderers. Sometimes these are people who look for vulnerable targets, campers traveling alone, asleep in their tents or RVs, far from help. I cursed myself for not telling anyone exactly where I was going. If something happened to me, who would know where to look? Minutes crawled by. The two figures outside circled the RV. I could hear their footsteps crunching softly in the leaf litter. Occasionally, they tapped on the windows, rattled the door, testing my reaction. I stayed quiet, trying to be invisible, but my every nerve was on edge. My legs ached from crouching. Sweat trickled down my face, even though the night air was cool. Suddenly, a third voice joined the mix. This one was a woman's voice, sharp and angry. "Stop messing around. We don't have all night." My blood went cold. There were 3 of them now. They had me surrounded. What did they want? Robbery seemed likely, but the tension in their whispers, the strange laughter, it felt more personal, more sinister. They knocked again, this time harder. The door rattled. "Come on out," said the woman. "We just want to talk." I stayed silent, clenching the hatchet so hard my knuckles burned. My mind ran through options. Could I scare them off by pretending to have a gun? I didn't have a firearm, but they didn't know that. Or could I slam the engine on and hope to tear out of there before they broke in? As I hesitated, something hit the rear window. A rock, maybe. The glass didn't shatter, but it made a sickening thud. They were done playing nice. The woman's voice again. "Open up, or we break it open." I had to do something. My heart thumped wildly as I stood up, crouching low to keep out of sight. I reached for the RV keys on the small table near the driver's seat. Another rock hit a side window, cracking it slightly. Time was running out. I swallowed hard. "I have a gun!" I shouted, trying to steady my voice. "Leave now, or I'll shoot." Silence outside. I hoped they'd fall for the bluff. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything but my own breathing. Then a man's voice, one of the original pair, snickered. "Go ahead, big man, shoot. You can't shoot all 3 of us before we get in." My stomach sank. They weren't intimidated. In fact, they sounded amused. Maybe they really didn't believe me. Another rock slammed into the window, this time breaking through. Shards of glass landed on the RV floor with a bright tinkling sound. Cold night air and the smell of damp leaves rushed inside. This was it. They were coming in. Instinct took over. I turned the key in the ignition. The RV's engine groaned but wouldn't catch. I tried again, praying it wouldn't fail me. Another rock flew through, hitting the wall behind me. I scrambled over the driver's seat, feeling the vibration of fists pounding on the door and sides. The engine coughed to life on the second try. I jammed the RV into drive and floored the gas pedal. The sudden movement caused a shriek of surprise outside. I felt the RV's body scrape against a tree branch as I steered wildly to avoid hitting a trunk. Headlights cut through darkness and underbrush. The RV bounced violently over uneven ground. I heard a man yelling behind me. A heavy thud on the rear suggested someone tried to cling on or throw something. Then more branches snapped, and I was too far away to hear them clearly. Fear gave me focus. I navigated back toward the dirt track, the engine roaring louder than it ever had. My hands shook on the steering wheel, adrenaline surging. I half expected one of them to appear in my rearview mirror, running full tilt after me. But as I cleared the clearing and made it onto the rough road, there was no one behind me, at least not within the range of my dim brake lights. I drove for miles, ignoring the scrapes and bruises on the RV's sides, the shattered window in the back. I just wanted out of that forest. Every bump in the road made me jump, my mind conjuring images of them waiting around the next bend, laying a trap. The darkness pressed in from all sides, and I found myself cursing my desire for isolation. Eventually, I reached a paved road. No streetlights, but I could see the moon glint off the asphalt. I followed it until I spotted a sign for a town. I can't remember the name. It was something small and forgettable, but it promised civilization, and that's all I needed. By the time I pulled into a gas station with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I was shaking from head to toe. I parked under the lights and locked every door. The attendant inside gave me a wide-eyed look when I stumbled through the door, my face pale, sweat-stained shirt sticking to my back. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at him, wanting to spill everything. How 3 strangers had tried to break into my RV in the dead of night, how I'd narrowly escaped. But I realized I didn't even know where to begin. Instead, I mumbled something about needing the restroom and some water. I spent a long time in that gas station restroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to slow my racing heart. When I came out, I tried to explain to the attendant in halting words what had happened. He listened, alarmed, and suggested I call the police. We tried, but cell reception was spotty and the small-town sheriff's office didn't pick up immediately. We left a message and he assured me that a deputy would come by eventually. I thanked him and waited in my RV with all the curtains drawn, every lock secured. Nobody came that night. In the morning, I decided to move on, not wanting to linger. Without precise coordinates or clear descriptions, I knew the chances of catching those people were slim. In the days and months that followed, I replayed that night over and over in my mind. Were they just petty criminals, or something more twisted? The way they toyed with me, whispering, laughing, suggested they enjoyed the fear they caused. I shudder at the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't managed to start the RV in time. Would I have been robbed? Beaten? Worse? It changed how I view the wilderness. I still love the woods. My childhood memories and respect for nature run deep. But now I understand that the forest, for all its beauty, can conceal human predators just as easily as it hides deer and foxes. I learned that you cannot be too careful, no matter how at home you feel in the outdoors. I never again camped completely alone in an unknown place. Nowadays, if I travel, I let friends know exactly where I'm going. I choose established campgrounds, where rangers and other campers are within shouting distance. I also carry better means of self-defense. I'm not a violent person, and I never wanted to need a weapon. But knowing what's out there, knowing how vulnerable you can be, I can't bring myself to travel the back roads and forests without at least something more intimidating than a hatchet. It's not about wanting a fight. It's about deterring people who see a lone traveler as an easy mark. The memory still surfaces sometimes when I close my eyes. The faint scrape of something against metal, the whispered voices circling the RV, the soft knock that made my heart skip. In my darkest dreams, I'm back in that clearing, Engine dead, keys missing, windows smashing in. I wake up drenched in sweat, relieved to find myself in my bedroom at home. I've told only a handful of people this story. Most believe me outright. A few skeptics think maybe I overreacted, that they might have been just pranksters. But if you had been there, if you'd heard the way they whispered and laughed, the tension in their voices, the satisfaction they seemed to take in my terror, you'd know it was no mere prank. They intended harm. The broken glass, the rocks they threw, they crossed a line far beyond a joke. I regret that I never got the names of the ranger or the visitors at the center who recommended that forest road. Maybe I would have warned them later. But at the time, I was running on pure adrenaline and relief, just trying to distance myself from that nightmare. It's been years now, and I've managed to find a compromise. I still venture outdoors, but now I do it wisely. I join small groups when hiking or camping. I pick places with at least some foot traffic. I've regained a measure of peace with nature, though I'm always aware of what could happen if I drop my guard. In some ways, it taught me that while nature is neutral, neither good nor bad, the people you might encounter are a different story. Isolation can attract those who seek victims. It's not a lesson I wanted to learn, and it cost me a sense of innocence I once had. But I survived, and I'm grateful for that. A twist of an ignition key, a bit of luck, and I managed to escape. For anyone reading this, anyone who dreams of a lone camping adventure in a quiet forest clearing, be careful. Let someone know where you'll be. Trust your instincts. Bring whatever safety measures you feel comfortable with. Understand that the world isn't always kind, and that the darkness between the trees can hide more than just shy woodland creatures. I'm living proof that a peaceful night under the stars can turn into a struggle to stay safe if you cross paths with the wrong people. I'm Daniel Crowley from West Virginia. I still love the woods, but I'll never again pretend that I'm the only one out there enjoying the solitude. My name is Emily Thompson, and I hail from the serene town of Morgantown, nestled in the heart of West Virginia. Growing up surrounded by the majestic Appalachian Mountains and dense forests, I developed an enduring love for the outdoors. Whether it was hiking the trails of the Monongahela National Forest or kayaking down the swift currents of the Cheat River, nature was my sanctuary. After college, I pursued a career as a freelance photographer, allowing me to explore and capture the untamed beauty of my homeland. However, one particular solo camping trip transformed my relationship with these beloved woods forever. It was late September of 2018, a time when the foliage was ablaze with vibrant hues of orange, red, and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of autumn's embrace. I had planned this trip meticulously, eager to document the changing seasons and find inspiration for my upcoming photography project. Armed with my trusty DSLR, a sturdy tent, and a well-stocked backpack, I set out to camp alone, deep within the Monongahela National Forest, a place I had visited countless times but never ventured into so far alone. My destination was a secluded spot known as Whispering Pines, a clearing rumored among locals for its stunning vistas and serene atmosphere. According to the map I'd acquired from the local ranger station, it was accessible via a narrow, winding trail that meandered through dense foliage and rugged terrain. The journey there was peaceful, the only sounds being the crunch of my boots on the leaf-strewn path and the occasional call of a distant bird. As I trekked deeper into the forest, the canopy above thickened, filtering the sunlight into a mosaic of shadows and light. After a few hours of hiking, I reached the clearing. True to its name, the place was tranquil, surrounded by towering pine trees that seemed to whisper secrets with every gust of wind. A small, clear stream meandered through the area, its gentle babble providing a soothing soundtrack. I set up my tent near the water's edge, the ground soft and damp from recent rains. Once my campsite was established, I began unpacking my gear, laying out my camera equipment to capture the breathtaking scenery. As the afternoon sun began to dip towards the horizon, I decided to explore the immediate vicinity. Armed with my camera and a keen eye for detail, I wandered along the stream, snapping photos of the vibrant foliage and the play of light on the water. Time seemed to stand still as I immersed myself in the natural beauty around me. I found a perfect vantage point atop a small hill, offering an expansive view of the forest bathed in the golden hues of sunset. Settling down there, I reviewed the photos I had taken, satisfied with the results. Nightfall approached swiftly, and I returned to my campsite to prepare for the evening. I built a modest campfire, the flames crackling and casting dancing shadows among the pines. With a cup of hot tea in hand, I sat back and reflected on the day, the serenity of whispering pines enveloping me in a comforting embrace. The sky darkened, revealing a tapestry of stars that twinkled above, unpolluted by city lights. The nocturnal sounds of the forest began to take over, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, and the steady chorus of crickets. Feeling content and at peace, I decided to retire early, eager to rise with the dawn and continue my photographic endeavors. I crawled into my tent, the cool night air mingling with the residual warmth from the campfire. As I drifted into sleep, the sounds of the forest lulled me into a deep, restful slumber. It was around 2 a.m. when I was abruptly awakened by a series of sharp, repetitive knocks against the tent's fabric. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I lay still, straining to hear what was happening outside. The knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent, followed by muffled voices speaking in hushed tones. My mind struggled to make sense of the sounds, perhaps a family of raccoons seeking shelter, or the wind playing tricks on my ears. Summoning my courage, I unzipped the tent slightly, peering out into the darkness. The moon was high, casting a silvery glow over the clearing. Through the thin fabric, I could just make out the silhouettes of 2 figures standing near the edge of the campsite, their faces obscured by shadows. My breath caught in my throat. I had never encountered anyone else in Whispering Pines before, especially not at this hour. The figures remained still for a moment, then one of them stepped forward, moving cautiously towards my tent. I could see the glint of a flashlight in his hand, the beam cutting through the darkness. My mind raced. Were they lost hikers, or something more sinister? Panic surged within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I grabbed my camera, the weight of it unfamiliar in my trembling hands, and unzipped the tent wider. "Hello?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can I help you?" The figures froze, their movements ceasing as they turned to face me. The flashlight beam swept over the tent, lingering on my face before moving away. Another knock followed, this time louder and more urgent. The second figure took a step forward, the flashlight's beam now directly on me. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice from shaking. The man with the flashlight hesitated before answering. "We're just passing through," he said, his voice gravelly. "We saw your light and thought you might need help." Relief mixed with suspicion. "I'm fine," I replied. "I'm camping alone. Do you need anything?" The second figure, who had remained in the shadows, finally spoke up. "We're low on supplies. If you have any extra food or water, it would help us out." My mind reeled. I was alone, but here they were, seeking assistance in the dead of night. I hesitated, unsure whether to trust them. "I have some extra food," I said cautiously, "but it's late, and I'm not sure if you should be out here alone." The man with the flashlight took a tentative step closer, his face still obscured. "We didn't mean to intrude. We're just trying to find our way back to the main trail. We got lost after our GPS failed." I glanced back into my tent, weighing my options. Giving them food and assistance could lead to an uneasy situation, but turning them away might escalate things if they had ill intentions. I decided to play it safe. "All right," I said slowly. "I have some snacks and water. Let me grab them." I unzipped the tent fully and stepped out into the cool night air, keeping a safe distance from the strangers. I reached into my backpack and handed them each a small packet of granola bars and a bottle of water. "Here you go," I said, my voice wavering slightly. Please stay safe out there." They thanked me, taking the provisions gratefully. As they ate, we engaged in small talk about the forest and the challenges of navigating without reliable technology. Despite my initial reservations, they seemed genuine enough. After a while, they expressed their intention to set up a temporary camp nearby to rest before continuing their journey at dawn. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering unease. "I have a spare sleeping bag if you need it," I offered, wanting to be as helpful as possible while maintaining my own safety. The man with the flashlight looked at me appreciatively. "That would be great. Thank you." I retrieved the sleeping bag from my pack and handed it to him. "All right, I think that's everything I can offer for now. It's getting late, and you should get some rest." They both nodded, expressing their gratitude once more before settling down a short distance away from my tent. The sounds of their subdued conversation and the rustling of their movements eventually faded, leaving me alone once again under the canopy of stars. I returned to my tent, trying to calm my racing heart. The encounter had been unsettling, but I rationalized that they were just fellow travelers in need. I settled back into my sleeping bag, pulling the fabric tightly around me, and tried to reclaim the peace I had felt earlier. However, my sense of security was short-lived. Around 4 a.m., the same sharp knocking returned, more aggressive this time. My heart pounded as I listened intently. The sounds were coming from the direction of the second tent, the one I had helped set up for the strangers. My mind raced. Could they have changed their intentions? Gathering my courage, I unzipped my tent again and peeked outside. The sleeping bag they'd been given was slightly disheveled, indicating they had moved or perhaps discarded it. The clearing was dark, the moonlight obscured by thick cloud cover. I strained my eyes, trying to see any movement, but the shadows offered no clues. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the forest as one of the trees near their temporary camp was struck by a heavy branch. Both figures stirred, and I could hear frantic voices now, filled with panic rather than calm. The man with the flashlight was shouting something, but I couldn't make out the words over the noise. Fear clawed at me. If they were startled by the crashing branch, it might be an opportunity for me to leave. I grabbed my camera and flashlight, my hands trembling as I prepared to make a decision. Should I confront them or try to escape unnoticed? Before I could decide, a third voice joined the cacophony, a harsh, authoritative tone that sent chills down my spine. "What's going on here?" The voice was unfamiliar, commanding. It sounded like someone in charge, perhaps a park ranger or a local authority figure. The three figures moved quickly now, the atmosphere charged with tension. The man with the flashlight and the other two were both visibly shaken, glancing nervously around the clearing. I realized something was wrong. This was no random encounter, and the sudden interruption suggested that external forces were at play. From behind the trees emerged a figure clad in a heavy jacket, carrying a large flashlight and what appeared to be a folded map. The man approached us, his expression stern. "Are you all right?" We heard the crash and thought something might have happened. Relief mixed with confusion. "I'm fine," I replied, still wary. "We're just trying to get back to the main trail." The newcomer nodded, his demeanor softening slightly. "Good. There's a group of hikers that went missing a few days ago. We've been searching for them, but the weather took a turn last night, making it difficult to continue. If you're lost, we can help you find your way." The man with the flashlight seemed hesitant, glancing between the newcomer and the rest of us. "We're not lost. We just had some technical issues with our GPS." I sensed that there was more to this situation than met the eye. The arrival of this authoritative figure, the sudden noise, and the behavior of the strangers hinted at underlying tensions. My instincts screamed that something was amiss, but rational thought kept me grounded. The newcomer introduced himself as Ranger Marcus Whitaker, a seasoned forest ranger familiar with the area. He offered to lead us back to the main trail, ensuring our safety. Reluctantly, the two strangers agreed, and we began to walk together under Ranger Whitaker's guidance. As we moved through the dense forest, I noticed the tension between the strangers and the ranger. Their conversations were clipped, their responses guarded. Ranger Whitaker's questions were thorough, probing for details about their trip and any potential issues they might have encountered. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was scrutinizing them for something. After a couple of hours, we reached a more populated area of the forest where the sounds of civilization grew louder. Ranger Whitaker stopped near a well-trodden path, turning to address us. "You should stay near the main trail from now on. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to the ranger station." We thanked him, and the two strangers quickly packed up their temporary camp. As they walked away, I caught a glimpse of something in their eyes, a fleeting shadow of fear or perhaps guilt. The encounter left me uneasy, but I brushed it off, eager to put the night behind me. The following morning, I woke up early, the sun casting a warm glow through the trees. I packed my gear, feeling a mix of exhaustion and lingering anxiety from the previous night. As I began my hike back to the trailhead, I decided to visit the ranger station to report the strange encounter and seek closure. Ranger Whitaker greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes serious. "Emily, glad you're safe. We've been looking for you since last night." I recounted the events, detailing the presence of the two strangers and our subsequent encounter with him. He listened intently, his expression growing more somber with each word. When I finished, he leaned back, sighing deeply. "There's something you should know," he began, his tone grave. "Those two men you met were part of a search party for the missing hikers. They were volunteering to help, but during the night, one of them went missing. We suspect foul play. Someone might have targeted them to prevent the search from succeeding." My heart pounded. The whispers of the forest had taken on a darker hue than I had imagined. "Do you think they were involved in the disappearance?" I asked, fear gripping me anew. Ranger Whitaker nodded slowly. "We're investigating all possibilities. It's why I arrived abruptly last night, to ensure everyone's safety and gather any information that might help us find the missing hikers." The realization hit me hard. The two strangers weren't just random travelers. They were part of a larger, more troubling situation. Their nervous demeanor and the sudden chaos suggested they were hiding something, perhaps connected to the missing individuals. "I need to be careful," I whispered, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I came here for solitude and inspiration, but now I'm caught in something much bigger." Ranger Whitaker placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing by staying calm and seeking help. We need to review your account in detail to aid our investigation. Every piece of information could be crucial." Over the next few days, I collaborated with the ranger and his team, providing detailed descriptions and recounting every interaction. The forest, once a place of peace and beauty, now felt tainted by the shadows of human malice. The whispers in the pines had taken on a sinister undertone, a reminder that even in the most idyllic settings, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. As the investigation unfolded, more unsettling details emerged. The missing hikers had been part of a local adventure club, exploring deeper into the forest than usual. They had encountered unexpected obstacles, rock slides and sudden weather changes, that hindered their progress. One member had disappeared after a heated argument with another over leadership decisions and the direction of the search party. The two men I had met were rumored to have had their own disagreements with the missing hikers, leading to speculation that they might have had a motive to silence someone within the group. The whispers in the pines now seemed to carry the echoes of these unresolved tensions, a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and camaraderie in the wilderness. Weeks passed, and the search intensified, fueled by the grim determination of Ranger Whitaker and his team. Gradually, clues began to surface, traces of campsites, abandoned gear, and faint signs of a struggle. The forest, once silent and serene, now held the secrets of a tragic tale, woven into its very fabric. One evening, as I stood by the stream that had been my sanctuary, I reflected on the events that had transpired. The forest had revealed its dual nature, a place of unparalleled beauty and a stage for human conflict. My love for nature remained, but it was now tempered with a heightened awareness of its complexities and the shadows that could reside within. The case eventually took a tragic turn. One of the missing hikers was found deceased, the circumstances pointing to foul play. The investigation grew colder with each passing day, the forest reclaiming its secrets as the evidence dwindled. The two men I had encountered vanished without a trace, their fate unknown, leaving behind a trail of questions and an enduring sense of unease. Though the immediate threat had passed, the experience left an indelible mark on me. The forest, while still a place of refuge, now held memories of fear and uncertainty. I continued my work as a photographer, but my lens now captured not just the beauty of nature, but also the lingering shadows that whispered among the pines. In the years that followed, I often returned to Whispering Pines, each visit a pilgrimage to the place where my encounter with the unknown had reshaped my understanding of solitude and safety. The forest remained a constant presence, its whispers a reminder of the delicate balance between peace and peril. One particular autumn, as I prepared for another solo trip, I paused to reflect on the lessons learned. I ensured that my plans were meticulous, sharing my itinerary with friends and carrying additional safety measures. The desire to capture the raw beauty of the wilderness was undiminished, but it was now coupled with a respect for the unpredictable nature of both the environment and the people who traverse it. As I set up my tent once more in Whispering Pines, the memories of that harrowing night resurfaced. The whispers of the pines seemed louder, carrying with them the stories of those lost and the echoes of unresolved tensions. I took a deep breath, anchoring myself in the present, determined to honor both the beauty and the lessons of the forest. That night, under a canopy of vibrant autumn leaves and a sky blanketed with stars, I felt a profound connection to the land and its hidden narratives. The forest had shared its secrets with me, and in return, I had gained a deeper understanding of the delicate interplay between solitude, safety, and the shadows that can emerge even in the most peaceful settings. Epilogue. Months after the incident, the case remained unsolved, the forest holding its secrets tightly. The two men I encountered were never found, their disappearance adding another layer of mystery to the already haunting tale of Whispering Pines. The memory of that night stayed with me, a constant reminder of the thin line between tranquility and terror. In the quiet moments spent alone in the woods, I often wondered about the lives of those who had vanished and the true nature of the shadows that had sought to disrupt our peace. The forest, with all its beauty and serenity, also harbored untold stories of human conflict and unresolved tensions, a duality that both fascinated and unsettled me. My experiences in Whispering Pines became a central theme in my photography, capturing not just the outward beauty, but also the underlying currents of fear and uncertainty that can exist within nature's embrace. The whispers of the pines were now a part of my artistic narrative, a testament to the complexities and hidden dangers that can reside in even the most idyllic settings. Through my lens, I sought to tell the stories that the forest held, giving voice to the silent whispers and honoring the memories of those lost. Each photograph was a step towards understanding the intricate dance between light and shadow, peace and peril, solitude and the ever-present possibility of encountering the unknown. The forest remains my sanctuary, a place where I find both solace and inspiration. Yet the lessons learned from that fateful night serve as a constant reminder to approach nature with respect and awareness, understanding that beneath its serene surface lies a realm of unpredictability and hidden depths. As the years continue to pass, the whispers in the pines still reach my ears, a haunting melody that echoes through the trees. They remind me of the fragility of safety and the ever-present shadows that can emerge when least expected. But they also inspire me to continue exploring, capturing the beauty and the mysteries of the wilderness, forever intertwined in a dance of light and shadow. Final thoughts. If you ever find yourself venturing deep into the forests of West Virginia alone, remember my story. Embrace the beauty and solitude, but remain vigilant and respectful of the land and its unseen inhabitants. Nature is a powerful force, one that offers both peace and peril, and understanding its duality is key to navigating its depths safely. Respect the whispers in the pines, for they carry the stories of the forest, stories of tranquility, of fear, and of the enduring human spirit that seeks to find harmony within the wild. Let my experience be a cautionary tale and an inspiration to cherish the delicate balance that makes the wilderness both a sanctuary and a stage for the unknown.